Well, Chris, thanks again for coming on the program tonight, sir. It's always good talking to you.
Well, thank you for having me back.
You bet. Front page story in the Washington Post today, and I guess the paper is surprised that people are actually buying firearms and keeping them in their home in Washington, D.C.
Well, I think that's right. I think they're very surprised. I think one of the big things that the story touches on but doesn't directly go after is the fact that people are doing that and the world has not come to an end, and none of these firearms have been involved in any crimes, and no one has done anything terrible with any of these firearms.
That's right. Now, the paper does focus on the fact that wealthy Washingtonians are buying firearms in greater numbers, or registering their firearms anyway, in greater numbers than folks in poorer neighborhoods. And I thought it was interesting. The lieutenant who's in charge of the licensing division pointed out, a lot of folks may not be able to afford a handgun, just in terms of the cost of the gun itself. But, it's important to remember that the city council and former Mayor Fenty put in place a lot of rules that add to the cost of gun ownership in Washington, D.C.
Well, that's right, and it's not just the financial cost, but it's also the amount of time that it takes to move through the process and to follow all the rules. And a lot of people that don't live in affluent neighborhoods have to work, and they can't just take a day off and go down and jump through all the administrative and bureaucratic hoops that the D.C. government requires them to do. And that's another issue that's out there. I mean, I can't just take the day off. I mean, that's just not how it works for working class people. And I don't think that some of particularly the political elite, consider that or even care.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, Mayor Gray actually quoted in an Associated Press story this afternoon saying that he is troubled to know that there are legal gun owners in Washington, D.C.
I would say his other quote in there, or actually, to be fair, it's not a quote, but it's a statement attributed to him, was that he doesn't want people to feel like they need guns at home to be safe. Mayor Gray, when he was the head of the council chair, and his colleagues voted to get rid of 400 police positions. So it's very tough for me as a resident and as a police officer to understand sort of the double side to these arguments. Yes, we're going to give you 400 less police officers, which is a huge number of police officers, but we don't want you feeling unsafe. Well, which is it?
Yeah, I guess, well, now, to be fair here, the statement is that he doesn't want people to feel like they need guns at home to be safe. So, Chris, he would say, I'm sure, look, the 400 fewer police officers on the street, yeah, you can be bothered by that, but for God's sakes, don't go buy a gun. Get a baseball bat or a golf club or something other than a firearm.
Right, even though everybody who's legally bought a firearm in the district has had nothing bad happen to them.
Well, absolutely. And again, we can point this stuff out. The fact that not one legal gun owner in Washington, D.C. has been charged with a crime. The fact that the crime rate has gone down over the past couple of years, even after the Heller decision. And frankly, I think the crime rate would go down even further, again, if more Washingtonians were able to exercise their constitutional rights without having to jump through all those bureaucratic hoops and hurdles that you mentioned.
Well, the one issue with this, or not the one issue, but one of the main issues with this is that the members of the council, who are very, very left, despite what the Supreme Court has said, do not view this as a constitutional right. And they've made it very clear that they'll do whatever they can and perform whatever legislative mischief they can to prevent people from doing that. And one of the things I've said in a debate with a couple of the council members in front of a citizens group was, if this was any other constitutional right, you would go to the mat to defend this. But because you personally disagree with it, everything goes. And that's not how we're supposed to operate.
No, absolutely not. Look, in the past couple of years, we've seen the district put in place a medical marijuana law so that individuals with a doctor's prescription can get access to marijuana. They've allowed for gay marriages, and they haven't put up, again, hoops and hurdles and bureaucratic red tape for folks to exercise what the council considers to be those rights. But the right of gun ownership, again, we want to make it as onerous as possible, as restrictive as possible, and as difficult as possible for as many people as possible.
That's right, and they've come right out and said that. I mean, the quotes that came out after Heller were frankly just jaw-dropping, and they've continued. And then but then there's a great deal of complaining here anytime the Congress takes a look and acts like they're going to step in, even though The Congress has final say on district affairs. But if you antagonize and you push the envelope and you say things that are not responsible, you're going to be treated as if though you're irresponsible. And our politicians don't want to hear that, and they apparently don't care.
Apparently not. Well, Chris, again, I'm glad you could join us on the program tonight, sir. And, other than the, I guess the Washington Post trying to make this into a class thing in terms of gun ownership, how are things going for police officers in Washington, D.C. right now?
Well, they're pretty grim times. We're down, like I said, 400, and we're going to keep losing folks. I think once we hit back down to the about 3,600, 3,700 police officer range, pretty much all we can do is answer radio runs. We're just radio run to radio run. The D.C. Council last year.
When you say, I'm sorry to interrupt, when you say all you can do is answer radio runs, you mean the investigative portion of law enforcement is going to be curbed?
More, I think, I was talking on the patrol side. We still have some, although our detective ranks have depleted over the years as well. It's more people want police officers out of their cars, talking to them, the sort of the community policing ideas that are out there, and we just don't have the resources for that, and then that creates frustration in the community because you have politicians still saying, well, look, we want more police officers out there on foot patrol. Well, we don't have enough people to do that. We have to answer the emergency radio runs, and I think it's a frustrating time for the police, and one of the problems is a lot of the cuts and the economic problems we accept and we understand that they're there, but you have a council that continues to spend past the budget. They've increased their own salaries and staff by 11% over the last 2 years, so it's very hard to then turn to the police and to the fire and say, oh, we're cutting police and firemen, but we're going to go ahead and keep our raises and our larger staff. And those are some of the problems that exist, and I know other jurisdictions are facing the same problems, but it still hurts.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, again, I'm glad you could join us this evening, sir. Look forward to doing it again very soon.